Hey there, this is Carrie with Packet Bomb. I'm going to go over a question that I got about what is a good or bad time sequence graph? Like, what does it look like? If you've read my site or seen any of my videos, then you might know that when I'm troubleshooting performance, the first thing I go for is the time sequence graph, specifically the TCP trace one. So let's look at a few of them and talk about why they're good or bad. If you saw the video about, don't blame the network or what was it called? I don't remember. How to prove the network isn't slow. I don't know. You know the one. Maybe you don't. Doesn't matter. But this is the capture from that video, and maybe it looks familiar to you. What you really want to see is a smooth line going from the bottom left to the upper right. Now, overall, this one does that. And in between these flat spots, it definitely does that. It looks nice and smooth and fairly dense looking. This is the data, this black line. But these flat spots are killing me, just killing me. This is, if you saw the video, these are like 180, 150 milliseconds. That's horrible, just terrible, where nothing is happening. So it's not good. Now, I'm not just telling you that it's not good. It's not good, but I also know that the kind of throughput I can expect between these two hosts on this connection is much higher. And if you go look, you can easily look at, let's do statistics. Let's just do summary. This is all the bits, including all the overhead, all the headers. It's averages 24 megabits per second. I actually expect a good bit higher than that, closer to 100 megabits. And we're not anywhere close. So I would say this is a bad one. Let's look at a good one. So this one, if I'm looking at this without knowing anything about the host, the connection, the bandwidth, the round trip time, I'm going to say, you know what, this is probably pretty good. It's nice and smooth, heading up. I don't clearly see any big problem spots. Now the first third of it, there are some gaps, but this is TCP going through slow start and ramping up until it hits probably congestion avoidance phase. And then it's pretty smooth. This data line is pretty solid. There's a couple spots where there might be some gaps. If you zoom really far in, you can definitely see gaps, but overall it's pretty consistent. Now, the way I also know that it's good and not just saying, oh, it's a pretty looking graph, is that I expect, based on the things I know about this environment that I did this iPerf test in, I expect to get about 85 megabits per second. And if I go look at let's look at just TCP throughput, because that's what I'm calculating, is when I do the calculation of using round trip time and your different buffers and windows and whatnot, BDP, bandwidth delayed product, I'm talking about, the actual data. So where am I going? Protocol hierarchy, and look at data, and it's 86.1. So that's it. I nailed it. This one is good. So I'm hitting what I expect in terms of throughput. Anything else to say about this? Yeah. There's a lot of things I could say, but I could talk all day. Let's look at one that's not so good. This one, it does go smooth and up and to the right. There's not any crazy flat spots or weird wiggly things. But, clearly it looks different, right? If you zoom in on this, you see we send a bunch of data and then we do nothing. And we send a bunch of data and we do nothing over and over again. So that's not normal. That's not what you want to see, rather. Our last one is this smooth, it's like a solid black line. So this one is sending a bunch of data and waiting, sending a bunch of data and waiting. Now this one is taken in the exact same environment and test machines as the last one. And this is like 5 to 6 megabits per second. So clearly not what we want. And let's look at the last one. This one is a little more complicated, right? It's not quite so. There's a lot of things going on here. We've got this big blue blob, and then it gets flat again, and then it kind of starts up, and then it changes angles. And, from that point on, like 4.5 seconds on, it looks okay, right? I mean, it's pretty solid. You can see it doing this little wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. That's okay. But what about this beginning? What does this mean? So you can see how it ramps up really quickly within a half a second. I mean, if we really started kind of right around 1 second or so, it ramps up really quickly. The line gets steep rather quickly, more so than the previous graphs. Previous graphs were, I think, Windows and Linux, and this is pure Windows. So we're hitting likely the network limit here. We're hitting congestion because these big blue lines represent selective acknowledgement blocks. So what that means is, we've lost some data, and TCP is saying, I lost some data, but I still have some data. We'll go over data loss and recovery another time, but this is data loss, and we're having to eventually recover it. And then there's, a big long pause here, and then we go back into slow start. And we start building up, and we hit more loss, and then we're going, probably into congestion avoidance, and it smooths out. It's a little less aggressive, and then it continues that way from that way on. So this one, if I look at the throughput for this, it's like in the 50-ish range of megabits per second. So that's a lot better than, say, 5 or 6 megabits, but it's not, mid 80s either. So it's okay. Could be better. Data loss isn't always a bad thing. I mean, we expect to have loss at some point. TCP is going to try to find the optimal throughput, and to do that, it has to find the ceiling. So we expect to find, data loss at times, and don't freak out if you see some. Now, this is quite a lot, and it really takes a long time to get going again. So it could warrant some investigation. This is not optimal, but this is, it's okay. So there's our 4 different graphs for you, from good to bad to okay. If you have any questions about this, let me know. I'll be jumping into like the details on some of these, specifically some of these graphs, to talk about the receive windows and the congestion windows and the SYN buffers and how it all plays together to control throughput. Super interesting stuff, I think. All right, you know how to find me, right? Okay, let me know if you have questions.